put the phone on the nightstand like it was a mic on a lonely stage, tapped the speaker button, and told me she'd slept with Miles. 3 other voices breathed into our bedroom from the Discord room she'd invited. "We're here so you don't gaslight her," one of them said, as if they were ushers in a theater and our marriage was the show. I felt my dignity twist like a bottle cap under someone else's thumb. Then my second phone vibrated against my hip, the one I used for the shadow marketplace I never talk about. The alert said my storefront nodes were being flooded, a classic bot swarm. I had 60 minutes to lift the infrastructure or I'd lose a quarter of what I'd built in silence. So that's how it started. My wife turned our private life into an open mic, and my enemies outside decided to set the fire while I watched my own house burn. She waited for me to speak. She had a way of refusing to flinch. "Say something," she said, and the word something carried a mile of contempt. I stared at the screen. Miles's name sat there with an icon, mouth muted and still somehow all over our room. The other icons were her friends from the studio, people who posted watercolor time lapses and wrote long threads about how commissions steal your soul. They had handles like Laurel and Glass Eater and a man named Tanner who I'd seen once, skinny as a speed limit sign. I knew their voices from late-night streams that leaked under the door when I tried to sleep. "I have to fix something for work," I said, and the chorus reacted like I'd pulled a classic male dodge. The truth is that in the code, you either fix something or watch the flood inches at a time. In life, you dick around and call it processing. I didn't trust myself to do the second when the first required hands. "You always have to fix something for work," she said. "We're done being alone in here." I took the marketplace phone and went down the hall to the small second bedroom that we called a studio and never used together. The monitor woke, all rectangles and cold light. My fingers remembered the map of my keys and the exact squeak the left shift made and the soft grit under the G from when coffee had dried there. I brought up the orchestration dashboard. 3 nodes grayed out like teeth under a bruise. My competitor had a name you'd mock if you'd never watched them peel your vendors away: Palisade. They were less a person than a method, a habit of sudden outages and sideways threats. Tonight, it was a million requests per second to endpoints that weren't supposed to be public, a storm that found the holes I thought I'd sealed. "Ravi," she called, standing in the bedroom door, a silhouette against the city night. Her phone still on the nightstand, voices still there like low static. "Say you heard me!" "I heard you," I said, and pulled a window to the front to watch the fake traffic pour. "And I hear you have witnesses." "That's the point," she said. "Because when it's just us, you're a wall. With an audience, you can't pretend I didn't speak." "I'm not pretending," I said, and it sounded weak even to me. On the screen, a log line flashed an unfamiliar ASN. Someone had hired a botnet that lived on old routers and ice fishing cameras. They'd printed a map of me and were setting matches on the side roads. I spun up a clean node in a region I never use, bled the load away, then killed the noisy endpoints. I changed a reverse proxy rule I'd been leaving for later because later cost money to break. My heart didn't know which emergency to attend to and decided on none. It idled, a mute cow in a field, while the farm took a slow, tidy fire. She disappeared down the hall. I heard the Discord room go quiet, or maybe she muted them to spare me their reactions. I stared into the cool blue until the first of my nodes came back green. It bought me half an hour. I had to reissue a token that had been copied somewhere it shouldn't, roll it across the code base, change the salt. This is what I'm good at. I can take chaos and reduce it to steps. People think that's stoicism. It's a kind of hiding. By the time the flood thinned, it was after 11. I rotated in backup IPs and updated the origin list. The logs steadied and the complaint queue stopped spitting back bile. I rebooted once for luck. Then I sat there with my hands in my lap, feeling like I'd come back to a house where a fight had happened and the winner had already left. At the bedroom door, I cleared my throat like a knock. The air smelled like the eucalyptus soap she liked to carve with her nails. She sat cross-legged on the bed, laptop open, mood lamp bending the walls into coral. Her phone face down now on the nightstand, like it needed to nap after performing. "I didn't invite them to hurt you," she said. "I invited them because you explain me out of my own feelings until I don't trust I have any." "Who is Miles to you?" Her face shifted. "A friend who saw me, and then it was more." The past tense waited there with teeth. "I saw it. She saw me seeing." We both pretended to look away. "You chose a stage," I said. "If we're a room with 4 walls, you decided to open one and put chairs out." "We have been in a room with no air for a year," she said softly. "You started leaving oxygen somewhere else." I thought about the other phone humming with customer disputes and banned listings, and the quiet money that moved because I made it possible. I'd started the marketplace after a vendor sold me a fake router, and it took me 5 hours to prove it. The bone-deep thrill of flipping a system to your favor is a hard thing to admit. The money was bigger than my day job, then much bigger, then embarrassing. I built it careful. I did not ask Corral to come inside that part of the house. I told myself it was protection. Now, looking at her, it sounded like a lie I had rehearsed in a voice that wasn't mine. "I'm moving to the sofa," I said. It was the smallest choice that felt like anything. "Don't," she said. "I'm going to my sister's." Her suitcase was already open in the closet. She left after midnight. I stood at the window and watched her carry the suitcase to the curb. Seattle does this thing on October nights where the air smells like metal and rain. A rideshare stopped under the streetlight and sawed my night into halves. She didn't look up to see if I was in the window. She already knew I'd be there and that I wouldn't wave. I slept sometime around 3. More like I went unconscious and woke with the socket of my jaw aching from a dream where I'd been chewing glass. The empty side of the bed felt like more than absence. It felt like a decision. At 6, the doorbell camera pinged an alert. Ring called the movement person, neutral the way machines are neutral about who wins. I looked at the clip and saw Miles the way I'd seen him once at her art show, tall enough to consider ceiling fans, a sweatshirt that wanted to be a uniform, hair that said beach or effort. He stood on my porch like he had been summoned there by ritual. He didn't knock. He just breathed for a while, a lighter flicking in his pocket. After a minute, he left a small paper bag by the door and walked back down the steps without turning around. I watched that clip twice, then watched it again an hour later as if he might choose something else in the rewatch. The bag was from a bakery in Capitol Hill. Inside were 2 croissants, 4 small chocolates, and a folded note with a dog doodle. The note said, "Tell him the truth quickly, and then don't say more." She'd written a comma like a hook. I put the bag in the fridge, then took it back out and threw it away because I felt like a character in someone else's scene. My phone vibrated with a different kind of evidence. Our bank app puts transactions into categories like it wants to teach you about yourself. The feed showed a payment from Coral's Venmo to someone named M. Glass 3 days ago with the note, "Studio rent for October," the emoji she'd added a little house. Another one a week before for Uber from Ballard, note, "Thanks for the lift," with 2 hands pressed together in prayer. It wasn't the payments. It was the language I heard in them, the notes we write to explain ourselves to the parts of us that read later. At 8, I showered and scrubbed my hair until my scalp smarted. The mirror swam. The clock made noises. I stared at my face and tried to see the version of me that had been either a wall or a refuge depending on the angle. I made coffee. I didn't drink it. I walked down to my office and raised the blinds on Puget Sound and watched a ferry unspool from the dock like someone pushed it. The sky was theater gray. My marketplace dashboard showed a line that had been bleeding red all night now, a little steadier. It looked like a thin reed you could balance a life on if you weren't too proud. At 10, my friend Noor FaceTimed me with the 3-beat chime that always sounds like it's mocking urgency. Noor is the only person who knows both me's. We met at a hackathon and never did anything with the pitch except become friends. "You look underwater," she said. "I am," I said. "Coral told me she slept with someone. She did it on speaker with people listening, and my store got hit." Noor closed her eyes like she was doing math. "Okay, on the store, I found the vector. You're not going to like how they mapped you." I waited. "You have a staging server you kept open with default credentials on a side port, because who would know?" she said. Palisade did. They got into the Nginx comp, scraped comment lines to find your hidden endpoints. They used them to flood you. You can bite their ankles back, but it'll cost you a leg. "I'll torch that box in 5 minutes, I said. "You'll also rotate your admin token and salt the places you left bare," she said. "Now, about Coral on speaker. I don't have a script, but I have a question. Does she need to get loud to talk to you?" "She needed witnesses," I said. "Same thing," Noor said. "When someone gets an audience, it's because the person they love is worse than a stranger to talk to. A stranger lets you be small. Sometimes the person you love is too busy guarding your image of yourself." "I'm not the one who invited Miles to my door at sunrise," I said. "Right now, your dignity wants to be the loudest voice in the room," she said. "You can feed it, or you can ask herself what made her think the only way to speak was to let other people hear." "My dignity is starving," I said. I know, she said. So feed it by not performing. Make a policy. No more speakers in the bedroom. No more code. You hide like it's shame. Nor had a way of turning pain into operational tasks. It was a trick and a gift. After we hung up, I did what I do best. I turned inward and made steps. I burned the staging server. I changed the admin token. I salted the passwords I should have salted. I took screenshots of the logs that showed the old IPs and that noisy botnet cascading like rain across a roof. I thought about printing them out, but stopped. There's a line where evidence becomes obsession. Around noon, Coral texted. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't an invitation. It was a calendar link. Therapist. Today, 4 p.m. I'll be there. If you come, the rule is we don't pretend. I stared at it until the screen dimmed. Then I replied, I'll be there. Then I added, no speakers, not even ghosts. We met at 4 in a ground floor office with a window that looked into a courtyard the building probably called Zen. The therapist's name was Leah. She wore a sweater that looked like it had been stolen from a Norwegian fisherman and a ring with a green stone you could hide in your palm. I sat on the couch. Coral sat in a chair. The room smelled like the inside of a book. Leah invited us to draw a timeline of the last 2 years. I watched Coral make marks for my late nights and my silence and the day I came home smelling like ramen and fear after a vendor dropped my name in a forum where my name shouldn't be. I marked the morning she quit a job because the client kept saying, make it more feminine, and then asked her to draw a princess doing dishes. Leah asked us to circle the places we each felt unheard. I circled everything. Coral circled everything. Coral circled everything. Leah nodded like that was not uncommon. Tell him why the speaker, Leah said to Coral. She rubbed her palm with her thumb, a habit that usually means her brain is editing. Because he's so good at untying knots that he unties my knots until I look down and I'm not sure I ever had a rope, she said. Because when I tell him something scary, he says, here are 3 steps, and part of me loves him for that, and part of me feels like I disappeared, because I needed him to know I said it, and because when I was a kid, my dad only told the truth when other people were around to check him. Leah turned to me. Tell her why the shop, she said. Because I like building something I don't have to justify to anyone, I said. Because at my day job, every line has a stand-up and a debrief and a ticket. Because this thing is mine, and the rules are my rules, and if I look at them too long, I see a scared little boy who never wanted to be told he'd made a mess. I took a breath. Because we had a year where her clients used her like a vending machine, and I made a promise out loud to myself to never let anyone do that to me. Leah nodded. It sounds like you built fortresses, she said. They kept you safe and kept you alone. I almost said, what about Miles? Leah heard that almost and held up a hand. We'll get there, she said. Her voice made Miles an object on a lab tray, unimportant for a second, which let me breathe. Coral did not cry. She doesn't when she's decided not to. She looked at me like we'd been asked to pass a ball between us, and I'd dropped it and wanted points for bending down. On the way home, we walked the same sidewalk because cutting a new one would have been a bigger decision than we had change for. The ferry horn sounded like someone complaining in another room. A bus hissed. The October light found its hour where everything looks honest. Were you with him at our house? I asked. No, she said. I never did that to you. My doorbell camera saw him on the porch, I said. I asked him to leave something, she said. I didn't ask him to stand there like a sinner. He likes performances. It's on me that I added our marriage to the set list. That's one way to own it, I said. She didn't look away. It's the only way I know, she said. At home, I walked past the trash, opened the bag, and took out the note with the dog doodle. The croissants looked like an apology you could pretend was breakfast. I held the note in my hand until the paper softened. That night, I slept in the bed, not because anything was fixed, because the sofa smelled like the dog we don't have. At 2 a.m., my watch tapped my wrist with a text from a burner number. You want Palisade? Stop changing your IPs and start setting honey. I stared at it until my eyes felt hot. I should have ignored it. Instead, I texted back, Who are you? The reply was a link to a forum hidden in plain sight, the kind with threads that look like recipes to anyone who isn't hungry for what they offer. Someone had posted a guide to scraping my storefront using mispriced items I had included by accident as tests. The signature on the post was a name I recognized from Coral's Discord room, Glass Eater. At 9 the next morning, I watched a screen recording Coral had posted of her painting a jellyfish in 3 minutes set to a song that wanted to be sadder than it was. In the comments, Glass Eater had left 6 hearts and an inside joke about coffee. I scrolled past a thread where the same name had posted a link 6 months ago to a tutorial on building community accountability. It wasn't evil, it was worse. It was satisfied with its own righteousness. I called Noor and read the text. "Set, honey," she said. "They want you to build a listing that looks valuable and track who touches it. You know that will escalate everything." "I know," I said. "In Michael." "You also know you're curious," she said. "Shut." I hung up and made a thing I thought I was done making. I built a fake vendor profile that looked like the front end of a bigger thing, left a couple of breadcrumbs in the documentation comments, a field labeled partner code that didn't do anything but log the origin of requests. I let it live for an hour and then watched as an IP set in Slovenia pressed its face to the glass. The header on the request included a token I'd only ever seen in a private channel in Coral's server, a bot they used to schedule group crits. I traced the token across the internet and found it in a GitHub gist posted by a user I didn't know who had starred 3 of Miles's repositories where he taught himself shaders at 3 in the morning. This is how conspiracy theories happen. You stack small somethings and make a big thing you can hold like a righteous banner. I'm not proud of the way the lines connected. They shouldn't have. But they pointed in a direction I'd been pretending didn't exist. Lives overlap. People share tools. The walls we think keep us safe are made of doors. I did not call Miles. I did not show up to his studio and ask what he thought a porch was for. I wrote down his name on a legal pad and then put it face down like a talisman against my worst self. At 11, Leia texted to ask if we were okay after yesterday. She spelled her name with an accent that I always forget to gift. She said, "If you need an emergency session, I have one today at 2,000. I asked Coral if she wanted to go. She replied, "Yes." I said, "My phone will be off." At 2:30, we sat again in the room that smelled like books. Leah greeted us with the exact tone she'd used yesterday, as if tone in therapy is a promise. I told her about the text, about the forum, about the way my curiosity becomes a stand-in for control. Coral told her that after the session last night, she sat at her sister's kitchen counter and cried because there'd been a second where it felt like we weren't enemies, and then the relief made her cheeks hurt and she wanted to punch something for making her need that. Leah asked Coral to talk about Miles, not about the act, about the person. "He is praise," she said, and flinched at her own word. "I mean, he makes art sound like a game you can win. He says I'm luminous and then hands me a reference and tells me which brush to use to become that. He knows how to be a fan. He does not know how to sit still when I'm quiet. He fills the quiet with music. It's almost impossible to be sad around him. It started as oxygen." "And now," Leah said. "Now it's a mirror with the angle fixed," she said. "I can only see myself in the way that makes me look expensive." "I am not a fan," I said. I hated how petty it sounded. "You are a witness," Leah said. "You annotate, you remember, you catalog. You think those things are nothing because they feel like they require less effort than fans. But witnesses are rare." "I don't feel rare," I said. "You feel replaceable to yourself," she said, and there was something in her tone that could cut metal. After the session, Coral and I did something we hadn't done in a year. We sat in a park and let the sun be pointless. A saxophonist practiced under a tree like he'd been paid to be a metaphor. A child screamed because a pigeon existed. Coral leaned back on her hands and looked at a thin cloud like it had earned a place in the sky. "I'm not asking you to forgive me," she said. "I'm asking you not to make me explain it over and over to a jury of your worst fears." "I'm not asking you to hate him," I said. "I'm asking you to stop putting me in rooms where I can't breathe." "We could make a rule," she said. "No more third-party performances. Not for us. Not against us." "Add a second rule," I said. "No more corners of our lives where we invite silence like a pet." That night, the marketplace held steady. I got 3 emails from my payment processor about chargebacks and one from a vendor asking if I would carry their friend's product line under the table. I wrote back that we don't have an under the table. It felt like a lie. It felt like a decision. At 1 a.m., I got an email from an attorney I'd contacted a year ago when a vendor threatened to swap me. He wrote, "We can put Palisade on their back foot without becoming them. There are letters. There are processors who don't like heat. Make me a packet." I started to gather the logs I'd screenshotted and the honey I'd laid and the list of IPs that had tried my locks. It made me feel less like a vigilante and more like a clerk for my own justice. It helped. The next morning, Coral came home to pack a bag for a week at her sister's. She moved through the apartment like an expert in a museum, careful with rope lines. I followed 2 steps behind because I couldn't trust my mouth and my hands wanted to touch the place where her neck met her shoulder and my chest at the same time. At the door, she turned and held up her keys like a question. "I'm not changing the locks," I said. She nodded. "I didn't think you would," she said. "I changed mine to the studio, not because of you, because of me." She left, and the apartment made a sound like something closing that hadn't been open per se, just invisible. For the next week, I worked. I also didn't. I stared at the window and thought about the way Coral had said praise, like a word you say in church, and mean like an apology. I took Noor to Black Coffee and told her about Leah's word witness. Noor said, "It fits." She said, "Don't use it as an excuse to stop being loud when you should." She said, "You built a machine that makes money in the dark. It's time to teach it daylight." She had a way of making sentences into schedules. I pulled my marketplace out of the corners. I shut down 2 vendor categories. I only carried because they made men who used the words bro and plug feel like they were in on something. I wrote a new policy page that used plain words. I moved the admin panel behind 2FA that hurt my spine to implement and made me feel like a person who cared about consequences. I put my legal name in a place where it mattered. Then I used the logs I'd gathered to let the attorney send letters to 3 processors Palisade depended on. We didn't accuse them of crimes, we accused them of risk. Companies hate risk more than sin. On Friday, Leah asked us if we wanted to try an experiment. She said, "Write a list of what you will not do in this marriage, and then write a list of what you will still do, even if the other person fails to do their part. Then bring the second one to me." I wrote a first list that was ugly even to my own eyes. Then I opened a new document and wrote the second. I will not attend any more performances where my pain is a prop. I will still listen when she says I've become a wall and ask how it happened. I will not build secret rooms in my life and call it protection. I will still keep some things mine and tell her why. I will not use logic like a broom to sweep away her fear. I will still use logic when fear wants the wheel. I will not be a fan. I will still be a witness. We brought them to Leah, and she nodded like we'd set down a metal box safely. Coral read hers aloud. It included, "I will not ask you to be a character in a narrative to teach me a lesson, and I will still turn down the PR in my head when you need us to be boring." Leah smiled at the word boring like it had been rehabilitated. A week later, the letters started to land. Palisade posted a thread about legacy platforms being intimidated by innovation, which is a sentence that always means someone's money got smaller. I watched 2 of their vendor accounts go dark within a day of each other. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like breath. The honey I set caught a bigger thing than I'd known I wanted, a timeline of requests from a single co-working space in Soto, including the day Coral had texted me late that she was at a crit and would be home by 10. The logs were just that, logs. But when I matched them to the calendar, I felt a heat that wasn't righteous. I closed the laptop and sat with my fists between my knees because a better man would not use a tool to replay moments he wished would change. Coral asked to meet at a coffee shop halfway between our apartment and her sister's. She chose a spot that sells pastries that look like math. She got tea. I got coffee. We sat by the window because the light forgives there. "I told him it's over," she said. "He said I would miss being adored. I told him adoration is a drug and I want a meal." "That's a very Coral sentence," I said. "It's a sentence Leah would call performative," she said, and we laughed in the way that says we've survived enough to laugh without being cruel. "I have evidence," I said, and then wanted to swallow the word back. "I don't need to see it," she said. "I don't need to negotiate what happened with different angles." "I'm not negotiating," I said. "I'm telling you, I'm not going to turn my worst hour into a hobby." She took a breath. "Thank you," she said. We took small steps like that for a month. We ate together twice. We spent a Sunday at the museum and pretended the paint could do any of the heavy lifting we needed to do ourselves. I hired a second mod to run the marketplace chat with rules that didn't feel like a fight with my old self. Palisade went quiet in a way that tells you the person on the other end got busier with their own fires. The attorney sent a final letter to a processor with a paragraph that had 3 citations. The day it arrived in Palisade's inbox, someone tried my doorbell camera with a hoodie, then took a photo of my porch, then left without pressing the bell. I took the clip to the police. They took my statement. It made me feel like an adult or a fool, I'm not sure which. The last time Coral and I sat with Leah before we decided anything permanent, Leah asked us to describe what we feared most. Coral said, becoming roommates who archive our pain with a shared calendar. I said, becoming performers who treat our marriage like content. Leah said, those are both possible. Then she said, you do not have to choose between privacy and accountability. You can make a third thing. You can be private and you can have witnesses who are not a crowd. What does that look like? I asked. It looks like rules and mercy, she said. It looks like agreeing on the sentences where your voices get small and who you invite into the room when you cannot hear each other. Two people who love each other sometimes need a third person who doesn't have a vote. We made something that day that I would not call a truce because truces end when the guns get bored. We called it policy because both of us are a little broken in the same useful way. The policy had two rules: no audience in our bedroom except the therapist or a friend we both choose. No corners of our life that either of us can't describe in one sentence out loud. Then Leah asked us to make one experiment. For 1 month, we would live apart but meet twice a week on purpose. We would not sleep together. We would not use text for anything more emotional than confirming times. We would respect each other's work, and we would carve an hour where the rule was that you cannot offer a solution until the other person asks. We did it. There were nights I thought about Miles and wanted to rage, and I did the thing Leah taught me where I put the rage in a chair in my head and asked it to tell me what it loves about me. It always said, I love that you fight. Then it said, sit down. On a Wednesday in November, Coral moved back one bag at a time. It was not dramatic. It was quiet in the way honest things are quiet. She set her bag on the chair and sat on the bed and looked at me like the person who had told her he heard her and then walked away to fix a fire might be a different person than the one standing in the doorway trying not to narrate the next hour. I sat next to her and told her a thing I didn't want to say. I'm still angry. I might be for a long time. I can be angry with you in the room. I can love you with that. Can I tell you a thing you won't fix? She asked. Yes, I said, and meant it. I'm angry too, she said. Not at you exactly, at the version of me that thought validation would do the job dignity had to do. We lay back on the bed and listened to the city not care about us. A siren ran by. Someone upstairs laughed, a single syllable like a hiccup. Our phones were in the kitchen by policy. It felt like we'd hidden knives in a drawer out of reach of children. Palisade didn't go away. They'll never go away. That's not how anything works. But they got smaller. The logs showed fewer teeth. The vendors who liked my new policy said in private messages that the light made them feel less dirty. A big reseller asked if I'd consider using their shipping network. I said not yet. I'm learning how to do the thing where I don't chase more at the expense of what I can look in the eye. On a gray Sunday at the end of the month, Coral set her phone on the nightstand, looked at it for a second like it was a pet we were trying to train, and then turned it off. Ready? She asked, an inside joke we hadn't earned yet. Yes, I said. She said. I slept with Miles, and for the first time since the night this all began, the statement didn't feel like a performance or a trap. It felt like a sentence that would live in our house the way a scratch does on a table you still eat at, a mark you notice when the light hits it and then put your plate down anyway. I don't have a moral that sounds like a t-shirt. I have a practice. When we fight now, I tell her the thing I would tell the log if I were logging it. Level, time, where in my body I feel it. When she feels me reach for steps, she puts her hand on my chest and I say, I'll wait. We agreed to see Leah every other week for 3 months as an insurance policy against our worst selves. We used the doorbell camera as a doorbell camera. We no longer let in croissants at wartime hours. On the day we told Leah we were staying and meant it, she asked us the question she had asked us the first day. What are you afraid of most now? Coral said, wasting the mercy we've asked for. I said, becoming a person who only knows how to be a wall. Leah said, write that down, not to frame it. To remember what you promised not to become. If you're listening because you've been made into someone's audience without asking to, I don't have rules to mail you. I have a thing, Coral said the night she came back, which is that accountability can look like a friend sitting with you while you tell the truth, not a stadium where you perform it. And a thing, Noor told me when I wanted to set the internet on fire, which is that dignity and rage are twins. You can't feed both. Would you ever agree to let witnesses into a private conversation if your partner swears it's the only way they can be heard? Or is that a boundary you'd never cross no matter how stuck you are? If someone turned your bedroom into a stage just once, is it a deal breaker, or can it be a line you draw and step back from without burning the whole house? If you want more stories like this, like and subscribe.